I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Antonio. Got a very special in-studio guest today. I've got Joshua of the Salt Lake Action Cinema Society, a local kind of film club membership group dedicated to action films that you screen at the Beehive, one of our local watering holes. So welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to hear more about this. And I'm going to be right up front. I haven't been able to attend one of your things yet, but anytime I see any kind of local activity dedicated to action, to cinema, anything like that, I gotta know more about it. So let's get going. Tell me all about it, man.
Okay, sure. Thanks. I'm excited to be here. It's my first experience doing this kind of a thing, and so I'm excited to chat about it. I'm Joshua, Salt Lake Action Cinema Society. We're going into, I guess we'd be ending our second year here in June. And it's been a fun, if occasionally challenging experience, The idea started a lot longer than we've been going, really, and kind of gestated for a while. So the Beehive, the folks that kind of run that, I've known through different avenues for ages almost, it feels like now, and that they had always kicked around the idea of having a movie nights, and so we had done something once or twice that was really casual, without any promotion or core theme or idea or anything. And it didn't really pan out, and it wasn't too long after that the pandemic and everything started up, and the idea still kind of lingered, and it was something I had at the back of my mind. And as my passion for action cinema became a little bit more in depth, I guess, I would say it's always been there, but as I had a greater appreciation for it, that kind of honed in on, maybe this is something that we could do for the movie nights and focus on and do something that way. I feel like there's no shortage of genre cinema showings, around the valley.
Right.
But it does tend to err on the side of, horror or like 70s cult film, and in my mind, I think lots of folks are familiar with John Wick or Arnold Schwarzenegger or different things like that, but there's so many great action movies that are direct to video or just kind of fly under the radar that I don't feel like I see advertised anywhere, it's stuff beyond just the typical cult classics, RoboCop, whatever that you might see somewhere. And so I thought that we might as well trying to highlight those.
Which I think is great. And yeah, I've had both Jesse and James, who do the Film Buff and Hard Boiled Night at Broovies, on the show several times. And they have a very, they have a very intellectual choice of what they show on their nights. But very rarely do I just see something dedicated to action. I love art house cinema. I love cult cinema. I love the, cheesy horror movies and 70s sexploitation flicks. But I'm a child of the 80s, born in 81. I saw Rambo 2 in the theater. I saw Aliens in the theater way too young. Action is definitely my go-to when it comes to comfort cinema. For anybody, really. You're doing a Sammo Hung flick that I've never seen on the next one in March. I'm okay, I might have to go to that one because I've never seen that movie. And that is one of the things that really excites me about when locals do this, is because, I can stream pretty much any movie. I have tons of movies around me. But if I see something that I haven't seen before, having the opportunity to see it with other people who also appreciate the genre, dude, that just makes the experience so much better. There is something to watching a film by yourself in the dark where you might appreciate it for what it is, but there are movies that are made for the audience experience. And I think action's the perfect amalgamation of that. Action and horror, and comedies too, because I feel like comedies these days, they aren't as daring as they used to be. for PC reasons, and that's a whole other thing. It's a whole other conversation. But like thinking back in the days like Terminator 2, when people would cheer, for a great action scene. Even The Matrix. I remember seeing The Matrix in the theater and people would cheer in those moments. You don't really get that anymore unless it's like a Marvel movie, and I feel like that's just kind of expected because people feel they have to cheer.
Yeah, and on the Marvel end of things, it feels more fandom oriented than like experience oriented. But I completely agree. Like if seeing like horror, for example, something that's really spooky and everybody in the theater is feeling it, it has its own sort of vibe or energy that is infectious, right? And it kind of feeds into that experience. And Gareth Evans, the director of The Raid, has a really great quote talking about exactly that and seeing action movies with an audience and how, even when something is super violent, as that violence builds and builds and builds, you get to a point where it almost becomes so absurd that it's gotten there, and seeing that with an audience, everybody kind of laughs together and experiences that and the absurdity of that. And it makes it for a greater moment, and sure. And I think that's been true with the experiences with some of our screenings. We did a mystery movie in November, which I'm going to keep a mystery here, but it's definitely targeted something that I wanted to be very absurd and over the top and very silly, and having the opportunity to watch that with an audience that had, fun, strong reactions to that was great and made it just, all around a much better experience.
So you've been doing this for almost like what, 2.5 years, you would say? Just over 2?
Yeah, it'll be 2 years in June.
What was a film that got the best response that you screened? Because I mean, that's the thing, is like sometimes there's the old standbys where people are like, oh my God, I got to go see this with a group because I love this movie so much. But also there's those movies, like I said, that it's the first time for not just, an audience. It might be the first time for like someone who is like, I'm not going to say a virgin to the action genre, but maybe it wasn't their cup of tea, and then a movie changes that for them. Was there one that like kind of really resonated with the audience that was like, okay, I had a good screening tonight?
Honestly, I think the mystery movie is the first thing that comes to mind, which was, I expected a good reaction and for people to enjoy it because of the movie itself. But I wasn't really sure, how responsive people would be to coming out for a mystery movie. Mm-hmm. And the majority of people that came out are folks that had not been out before, which I was very surprised by. And to me, if you're like, oh, I have no idea what this movie is, I've never been out to this event before, that message is like, these are probably not people that have like the super deep library of knowledge as far as obscure action movies are concerned. And I would definitely consider that particular film to be more on the obscure spectrum of things. It's a Gary Daniels movie, and if I'm sure even just that there's a few amount of people that are familiar with Gary Daniels in general. It was wild, and to see a lot of those people the next month, it felt like it resonated like very heavily with people, which is great.
I think that's a challenge of being like a programmer sometimes, is the hits and misses. So for example, I have a cult film club. Every month we meet, and I show one film that I would say is like, if not recognizable immediately, one that at least kind of entices them. And then I always have a secret double feature. So they always want to know, well, what's the double feature? Because then we'll determine if I stay or not. I'm like, no, I'm not telling you. Like, you're going to find out when the credits roll, right? Of what the second feature is. Sometimes it's a hit, sometimes it's a miss. And I can always tell if it's a miss with some people because the next month, like, they're like, I think I'll skip this one because they didn't have a good experience. I think that's the fun of it, is like the daringness of like saying, okay, I'm going to play something that might not be for everybody, but it might resonate, and it's a hit and miss. I can tell you right now, anytime I've tried to play any kind of like Italian giallo or Italian horror, it turns some people off because they're not used to that kind of violence and that kind of sexuality. I usually give a trigger warning first. It's like, all right, if you don't like these kind of movies, you probably won't like this movie. But then sometimes it's like, oh, wow, that was like something I've never seen before. And then they ask me for more, So yeah, I think that is kind of thing. Same like when you make a mixtape back in the day for someone and you think it's the shit, and then like, hey, how'd you like that mixtape? And they've never listened to it again, it's that same thing. It's like taking those risks, I think, is part of the fun, and then, not letting it get you down if it doesn't play as well as you think it would.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's almost surprising because it's never what you think it's going to be.
Right.
And like, so there's definitely like we showed Commando, which going into it, I was kind of like, oh, it's Commando. Like, this is like beyond Terminator is the de facto Schwarzenegger movie, in my opinion, and kind of a weak turnout, which I was surprised by. And then like, I had mentioned the mystery movie where it was like, there wasn't a lot of heavy promotion because like, what are you going to spend a bunch of money to advertise? Nothing, essentially, and the amount of people that had come out that didn't know what it was or anything about like Action Cinema Society or anything else. And that's been a consistent pattern where it's just never really what I anticipate. But, as you said, one of the things I try for with that is having something that's a little bit more mainstream, some of the standby classics that people will recognize. And hopefully if people have been coming out for a while or look at the Instagram history or whatever, can establish a little bit of trust of like, well, I don't know what that is, but there's all of these other things. And so hopefully I'm willing to take a chance on that.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that like I talk to Jesse at Broovies all the time about is like, coming up with that good playlist, because if you do 3 like weird, obscure art house movies in a row, as much as you want to expose people to that, some people are just not on board. They want to come and see something that's familiar. They want comfort food, right? They want comfort cinema. So you got to play the hits sometimes. You got to do. Same with my podcast, man. Like if I just do like weird, artsy cult films all the time, yeah, I've got that group of listeners that's all they want. But people also want to hear me talk about hard target,
Yeah. People
also want to hear me talk about like Schwarzenegger and Stallone films. One of my most popular episodes of the year was Tango and Cash. I'm like, how? But hey, it's the thing where it's like you sometimes have to kind of reel them back in and say, all right, we'll play you the hit, we'll give you the bubble gum, we'll give you the candy, and then we'll expose you to something a little bit more challenging. I think that's like the sign of a good programmer is knowing how to attract an audience, how to expose them to something more daring, but also know when you've pushed the bar. One of the stories that Jesse told me about one of the Broovy nights, one of the hard-boiled nights, I think it was, is they decided to screen Death Wish 2. But they hadn't watched Death Wish 2 in years, and they forgot how rough of a movie it was. And they'd shown some crazy shit before. I mean, they've shown The Devils, and they've shown Sallow. But people got pissed off at Death Wish 2. And I was like, yeah, I'd have been pissed off at Death Wish 2 as well. I mean, I'm a huge Bronson fan, but that's an ugly movie. You don't think it's as ugly until you revisit it as an adult. You're like, oh my God, this is rough. So yeah, I definitely see that. What about movies that didn't play well? Is there one that was like, oh my God, that bombed?
Honestly, I think that when people are out, it seems like the people that are there are enjoying themselves, which is great.
Right.
It's when, it's me and the guy that runs the venue, that we're the only people that are there. So we had like a Universal Soldier screening that nobody showed up for, essentially,
Underrated, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's I could go on and on about Universal Soldier for better or worse. I think the first one is good, but the sequels get better and better and are super underrated. Where like definitely like Regeneration, Day of Reckoning are like peak action cinema in my opinion. But anyway, I digress. And there's been a couple of those where it's a lot of folks just haven't turned out. But it's still a good time, and for the most part, I'm trying to show things that I enjoy, and so still get to hang out with 1 or 2 friends or whatever it is, and watch a cool movie. So,
that's one of the things that eventually I want to do an episode on that I haven't really. I mean, I've done it like one-offs, but I think there is a lack of appreciation for the amount of amazing action cinema that came out direct to video in the late 80s and through most of the 90s until like VHS kind of went away. God, like I remember Cinemax back in the day having just some great action movies. One of my favorite ones, Mark L. Lester, director of Commando, he made a movie with what's his name? With Scott Glenn and Andrew McCarthy called Night of the Running Man. And essentially what it is Andrew McCarthy, a con man in Vegas, right? Scott Glann's a hitman, and he's chasing him all throughout Nevada into California. And it's a good action suspense movie. Nobody's seen it because it was literally like on video and on Cinemax. And you go back and you watch some of those, let's say, direct-to-video sequels. I mean, some are not great, but some are like, wow, that could have been in the theater. Why wasn't it? Some of those direct-to-cable action films are great. You know, I've got the Arrow Video box set of all the old Charles Band movies. That a lot of those were direct-to-video or direct-to-cable too. Like those are super underappreciated as well. So that's something that I think I'd love to have an episode about, of like underrated action films that never made it to the big screen. There's a lot of them.
There is a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with PM Entertainment.
Not off the bat, no.
Okay, so they were kind of one of the big inspirations for me to start this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were exclusively a direct-to-video action studio through the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So they started like 1988, 89, something like that. And they kind of had their finger on the pulse as far as, you know, the home video boom. So everything that they would film, they filmed for just home video release.
Right.
And they, you know, like there's the term mockbuster, where
yeah.
like Asylum or whatever, they have something that comes out at the same time as like Transformers, but it's Transmorphers. Yeah, right. Which, you know, as a quick aside, like I worked at Blockbuster for a long time, and I wouldn't have thought that worked, but the number of people that we would see rent those titles thinking that they're not what they were was astounding, you know? But they had that same sort of thing, except it was just not quite as direct. It was like, we'll just take that idea and make our own version of it, you know? But as far as action is concerned, they're really fantastic. Like Gary Daniels has like the 3 R's kind of was what they call them, Rage, Recoil, and Riot, that are like just insane action movies, you know, where they have like multiple real deal car chases with everything blowing up, and like it's all practical, and you know, and nothing's faked. But then at the same time, they had very modest budgets for that sort of a thing, and so like they're famous for having like painted a car one color on one side and a different color on the other, and filming it, blowing it up, and then using it for 2 separate films because, you know, things like that. And like The Sweeper we had shown, which is fantastic. There's a car chase scene where they're going down the highway at night, and trying to catch the bad guy, and there's a truck alongside of them that has all of these propane canisters that then of course start flying off the back of the truck and exploding all over the highway. That's like minutes, like it's like 5 minutes of this whole thing. And
I think one of the conversations that I've had recently that really made me think about how much we miss of the days of home video, especially, was that for Americans, John Woo films were strictly a video experience. You know, like we didn't get first run of Hard Boiled and The Killer, at least not in mass media theaters. They'd be like in art house theaters or the Grindhouse Theater in the downtown of some big city. But we discovered those on video. And he already had a cult of action cinema fans on video before he started getting movies like Hard Target and Broken Arrow and Face Off, you know? So he did appeal to the video audience. And, you know, there's no doubt that Tarantino, you know, really spending all those years in his video archive store, recognized that. And I think that is where that 90s, especially early 90s indie film boom into, you know, the crime cinema, and every year we're going to have like 5 Hitman movies, right? It's because he saw what audiences in the video stores were renting and coming back to rent and renting multiple times. And if you're already a fan of that genre, well, then you're essentially tuned into what your audience is and what they want. And I don't think that it was a thing that Hollywood recognized. They're looking at receipts, right? In the 90s, especially the 80s with like the blockbuster era of the 80s, they're looking at box office receipts with movies coming out a year on video after the theatrical release. It was really hard to kind of see what was going to be hit or not. I mean, I remember in 1990, maybe even 91, when we finally got the Batman home video release, and it was like the biggest VHS of all time. I had friends that worked at video stores back then, and like, oh yeah, no one rented anything else but Batman. And then once that tuned down, we saw an uptick in all the stuff that wasn't moving because everyone was done with Batman or they bought it, right? And I think that is one of the things that Tarantino recognizes. Like, okay, I see what people are getting. Or if we only have 2 copies of Batman and it's gone, now it's my job as the clerk to recommend something. And I think that's where a lot of people got their first taste of some of this action cinema that you're showing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, like for me as like a film / historical kind of nerd, I like to see, you know, how those things influence each other as it goes on. There's a writer, Tom Bryhan, for AV Club, right? Probably the contributor, you know, whatever. But he had a really great column called "The History of Violence" that he kind of attempted to go through each year and identify the most influential action film of that year, and you know how it would affect things to come. And so he'd started with Bullet, so that's 64, 68, something like that.
I think it's like 68. It's like late 60s, yeah.
And so that, I mean, that's a great read for anybody that's interested in seeking that out. And very detailed, very insightful, something that I really enjoyed. But as far as DTV goes, you know, like I grew up watching Jackie Chan movies from Blockbuster, and you know, Miramax would bring those in, and a lot of the time they're not the same cut even that they made in Hong Kong. So they cut 20 minutes out of it, and then it's dubbed and they rearrange it, and so maybe the plots don't make any sense, but the fights, whatever, are there. And for me, as you know, a kid, my mind was still blown. I didn't know any better. And John Woo starts to gain that popularity with audiences, and he comes out west to do Hard Target and things like that. And I think for American cinema, that was kind of a slow beginning to where things have gone now, because, you know, by 1999, The Matrix comes out, which completely changes the landscape as far as like what Western or American action cinema is doing.
And not even just action cinema, just cinema in general.
Cinema in general, right. And, you know, and that's all choreographed by Yuen Woo-ping, and that was a very secret thing, I guess, from what I understand. And Chad Stahelski, the director of John Wick, was Keanu's stunt double for that whole thing and was brought in for all of the first Matrix movie. And so it's very easy to trace those threads of like, oh, okay, this is coming in as an import, it's hitting the video store. Now we're going to try and do our own thing from that and grow from that and everything.
I think it's one of the funniest things that like I like to tell people is like, you know, the directors of the first John Wick, right? Brad Pitt stunt double for 20 years and Keanu Reeves stunt double for 20 years, right?
Yep.
And then also choreographing and staging a lot of the Jason Statham films throughout the early 2000s before they hit big with John Wick. Yeah, I love, again, there's the DNA of it where you like can trace people's careers all the way back through time and recognize where a lot of that from. I don't know why it just popped in my head, but like one of the worst movies ever made. I can't believe it's so bad because I'm a huge fan of the director. Is Peter Hyams did that Musketeer movie where Tim Roth was the bad guy, but Yuen Woo-ping was the choreographer for a swashbuckling movie.
Yes.
The fight scenes are fun, but that movie is terrible.
That's all, you know, that's all I remember about it. It was like all of the wire fu style stuff that they're doing.
But like in 17th century France. Yeah, I mean, so some things don't always work, but I appreciate the effort.
Totally. You know, and like the DNA and Peter Hyams, he also did Sudden Death with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Underrated Jean-Claude Van Damme movie.
Yes. I think kind of dismissed as like, oh, it's Die Hard in a hockey rink or like whatever, but
well, and it's also at the tail end of Van Damme's like
success, like pre-collapse, whatever, a $10,000 a day cocaine addiction, whatever. But then, you know, a Universal Soldier that was brought back by John Hyams, who's Peter Hyams' son, and you know, brought Jean-Claude back for those films as well. And honestly, I think is a super underrated director. Like both of those, he directed the shit out of. Sick, which is like the screenwriter Kevin Williamson wrote the script for that, which was fine, but Hyams directed the shit out of it. Like that guy puts together some of the best chase sequences, in my opinion, very thrilling and like exciting and intense, and you can definitely see like how all of that stuff kind of informs the thing.
Yeah, no, I love talking action, man. So let's kind of talk a little bit about Salt Lake Action Cinema Society before we jump into like our kind of little closer, which was we've brought 3 action films that we wish had sequels. And you and I both kind of talked offline. We're not huge sequel guys, but at the same time, I think it's more like I wanted to see a continuation of the universe, not necessarily the story. I just like the worlds that these movies exist in, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But so what's coming up? It's Salt Lake Action Cinema Society, and tell people like where they can find the website, how they can become members, get involved, and like what some of the perks and benefits of it are.
Sure. So for March 10th, we're doing Eastern Condors, Sammo Hung film. It's I think probably an unjust but fast and somewhat accurate description is if Jackie Chan made Rambo First Blood Part 2, you know. It's a man on a mission movie with a bunch of Chinese convicts being told that if they complete this mission, they'll get their freedom. And it's excellent. You know, it's one of his best in my opinion. And I'm a personal believer, and I know I'm not alone in this, that Sammo Hung's one of the best to ever do it behind the camera. Hugely influential, if subtly influential, as far as like putting together fight choreography and how it's filmed and edited together. You know, lots of people complain about quick cuts, post-born, you know. But if you watch a Sammo movie, there's lots of cuts in a fight scene, but the way that they're put together, the brain doesn't perceive it that way.
I agree. The energy is a lot different. And I don't know, there's chaos and then there's controlled chaos, right?
Absolutely.
I would say that Green Grass for those Bourne movies, it's chaotic and I'm not a big fan at all. But the controlled chaos, like, I think Oliver Stone, even though he's not the action director, the fact that like his average cut time is like 2.5 seconds, you know, but it's a controlled chaos. It works for what he's trying to do. And I agree. Sammo Hung, the way he is behind the camera, I was about to say that. And the fact that he's so malleable, where he can do comedy and action. And of course it's Chinese, so there's melodrama.
All at once, yeah.
But never does it feel like unvalidated. It really works with the story that he's telling, at least with the ones that I've seen. Yeah, I'm a huge Sammo Hung fan.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's fantastic, and like, you know, people harp on, oh, well, a fight has to tell the story, which I think he's a master at as well, and is just fantastic. So Eastern Condors is March 10th. For April, I'm thinking we're going to do another mystery movie, and with the previous one, I very much was like, if this is our last year and this is the only opportunity I have to show it, this is the thing that I'm going to show. But now that I've got that out of my system, I'm planning to put a poll out for, you know, folks that follow on Instagram or Discord.
Cool. Well, like, I found you on Instagram. So where else on social media should people look for that and like sign up and get their name on the list?
Primarily Instagram for sure. We have a Facebook, but it's almost more perfunctory than something that's actually used. And we have
You kind of just have to have one these days, right?
Yeah, you know, and it was a good start, and like it's everything feels like bots, to be honest, you know, and nothing feels like it's a genuine interaction or anything else, which has not really been the case with Instagram, which I am a little surprised by. Other than that, we have a Discord that we have members in, but none of us are particularly chatty as far as being good conversation starters. Instagram's probably the best, but we have a website, slacks.net, the Salt Lake Action Cinema Society, abbreviated, not like pants, slacks. And that, I mean, it's pretty simple. Membership details, whatever is upcoming is about all that's there. And also, we're working on a film festival for the end of this year.
Yeah, I saw that in your link tree.
Yes.
So explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so that's a Haymaker Film Festival. This will be our first year or first season debut. Very exciting. You know, with Salt Lake Action Cinema Society, I really wanted to explore kind of the past action stuff. I do an introduction before each film, kind of giving the history of it or things that are interesting to me about the production, and try to give credit to like stunt coordinators or choreographers, that kind of a thing. And I wanted to carry that same kind of energy into something that's contemporary. There's lots of indie action filmmakers, you know, that maybe don't have the budgets to even do something that's direct to video, that still put out really incredible work that I think should be seen and that people will enjoy. And I really wanted to highlight and showcase that as in like a festival kind of environment.
Yeah.
There's lots of filmmakers out there that started very much like we are, where it was a DIY sort of, you know, this is the thing we're going to do. So we're going to go out and we're going to film on weekends over the course of a year with our own money and everything else to make this happen. And for me, that was really inspiring and was like, you know what, let's do that same sort of energy. Like, we don't need to have hundreds of thousands of dollars to be Sundance or to be Slam Dance or to be in any of these other things. And let's just put it out there and see what we can do.
I mean, like, I do not turn my nose up at like short form action films on YouTube. Like, thinking of directors like Fede Alvarez, the guy that did Hardcore Henry, like, they just started with like little shorts on YouTube and people recognize the talent. I forget the dude's name, but the guy that did like Rocket High School, I'm not sure if you remember that. He was this Asian guy and he did all these great like little action sequences, very special effects heavy, but never really like did anything feature with it. But still, like, you gain an audience and you get like the recognition, like, okay, someone give this guy a feature. Someone give this guy an opportunity, you know?
Absolutely.
I think that's something that's like very overlooked these days. And I don't know, maybe studios took too many chances on people like that and got burned. Who knows? Like, I'm not a producer. I can definitely, say that I've seen some films like, oh, who made that? And I look it up like, oh, nobody. He was a guy they found on YouTube, and it works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't, but that doesn't mean the talent's not there for sure. So yeah. Okay, so let's go over our list. We each brought 3 films to the table.
Yes.
Of movies that we would make a sequel to. I'm not saying that it needs it. I'm not saying that we absolutely want it, but it'd be fun if there was one, a continuation of the story or the universe. You're my distinguished guest, so you go first of a movie that you think would be cool if they made a sequel to, and why.
Okay, yes, absolutely. So my first choice would definitely be Dredd. The most recent one, of course, not the Stallone Judge Dredd, but Carl Urban, I think in particular, knocked it out of the park as far as what I would expect out of a Judge Dredd.
Olivia Thirlby, too.
Yeah, I mean, it was fantastic. Completely exceeded any expectations that I would have for it. Like, I remember seeing trailers, whatever, and being like, ho-hum about it, especially because of the whole 3D thing that was really forced for a while post Avatar or whatever. Yeah. And it just, I almost feel like it was a disservice to that. I think if they weren't trying to push that gimmick as much, maybe theater audiences would have been more receptive and we would have seen that sequel. But I think the world, of Mega City 1 is so cool, and it's simplistic enough that I don't feel like doing another one would really run it into the ground, and all of a sudden where you're like, oh man, like, you really ruined the thing that I wanted to see out of this.
Well, I'm telling you what, like, never have I seen a sequel petitioned for so heavily online.
Absolutely. It's
quieted down because I think people finally gave up, but for a while we were just like, give us another Dredd. Urban wanted to give us another Dredd. Alexander Garland writing that one, and now he's doing his own films. It's like, dude, Dredd, hello.
Yeah.
Civil War was great, but we don't need movies like that. We need another Dredd for sure. And I'm a guilty pleasure fan of the original Stallone one. I'm fine that it didn't get a sequel, but Dredd for sure. And of course, the meme where anytime a movie gets a sequel and they have the picture of Urban just with that grimace, like, oh, and Dredd doesn't get one.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that meme too. That will never get old to me. Agree 100%.
It's a 5-star frown from Carl Urban.
5-star frown.
Yeah, he doesn't
he never takes the mask off.
I know, it's so perfect. I'm so glad that was the case. It's perfect.
And Lena Headey too, man. Like, great villain.
Yes.
That movie is just so good, so underrated. And I can't really say it's underrated now because I think it did find its following, right? It found its following later.
Yes.
And also, dude, the tenement building action genre, because we got that and we got The Raid essentially like a year apart from each other.
Yes.
I thought that was going to be the next big thing. I'm like, give me more tenement building action. Give me more Game of Death, right? Like, you start on level 1 and you go up.
Totally.
I think it's ready for a rebirth. It's been a decade, right?
Yeah,
or more.
right.
Let's get another one.
Yeah, I think people were kind of afraid of, like Dredd was like, oh, it's sci-fi, The Raid.
Yeah.
Which, is a little reductive in my opinion, but I like that single location of, like, it's almost like the inverse of a siege thriller, right? Where it's like, we're not just defending ourselves, but we're just like beating the shit out of everybody trying to get to the top of the building or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And the higher it gets, like the tighter the hallways get, the
Yeah.
action gets more intense.
The slow-mo fall from the top.
So good.
So good.
All right. So the first one I'm bringing to the table, since you already kind of mentioned Jackie Chan earlier, where's our Rumble in the Bronx sequel, man? Like, Rumble in the Bronx, I don't think people understand that if you were in the 90s for a lot of people, Rumble in the Bronx was your intro to Jackie Chan.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, I'd already seen a bunch of Jackie Chan films because I was unfortunate enough to have cable as a kid, so I'd seen a bunch of stuff. But I remember like when that trailer came out, seeing the trailer for that and people like just freaking out over the stunts. They show all the stunts in the trailer. They're like, okay, I've heard of Jackie Chan, but this is what Jackie Chan is? Like, yeah, he's not Bruce Lee. He's not just about like the style. This guy is doing stunts and he is jacking himself up doing them. And then they're going to show you at the end of the movie all the ways he did get jacked up. I mean, the story obviously isn't anything great, but what I did like is the fact that we brought him to, it was Canada, but the Bronx, right? Why didn't we have like Rumble in Brooklyn, Rumble in Jersey, Rumble in Trenton? I don't know. Like they could have kept doing it, where Kyung keeps getting in fights with people in different boroughs. Have it be like a Gangs of New York thing, right?
Absolutely. One for each borough.
One for each borough. Yeah. I've always thought that Rumble in the Bronx could have been its own cinematic universe. It's just, something that I wish we had, but it's fine that we don't. And then they started pairing him up with Chris Tucker and things like that. I think that's when things went south. But yeah, I do, and I'm also kind of sad they didn't bring Police Story to America. Why not,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Police Story, like, right, they did get all of the Police Story sequels, whatever. And I think there's like 6 now or something.
I saw a bunch of them. They're not that bad.
No, at least through Super Cop, the third, they're equally fantastic in my opinion. But yeah, I think Rumble in the Bronx is sorely missed as far as the sequels there. And for me, that was like definitely an exposure. That and Who Am I were the ones that I had on VHS, and the dubbed version, of course, as a kid, and didn't even register, that it was like not an American movie or anything else. So.
Right. And they have like the repertory actors in each one, but they always play different characters.
Yes.
Like, oh, he's like the uncle on this one, and he's the general on this one, and he's the old cop in that one, fun stuff. All right. What's your second one?
Second one, it was probably going to be Cobra. So 1980s Stallone movie, like pinnacle, like bad cop, kind of a thing, like Dirty Harry juiced up on steroids, essentially. Which, and you mentioned Giallo. That's always what I think of when I watch Cobra, is it has a very heavy,
it is
like Giallo vibe to it.
Yeah, Stallone's kind of action Giallo. You know the whole history behind that, right? Of how Cobra kind of came to be.
Not in depth. It's from my perspective, it seems like it's probably like lots of cocaine and hammer. They're like, oh yeah, let's put this together. That sounds cool.
Okay, so a lot of this is hyperbolic, right? But Stallone was the first choice to play Axel Foley in Beverly Hills Cop. And he didn't want it to be a comedy. He wanted it to be super serious. He wanted to have a matchstick in his mouth. He wanted to like Stallone Beverly Hills Cop.
Of course.
And Martin Brest was like, no, this is a comedy. We're keeping it a comedy. So what he did is he took all the shit that he had written for his role in Beverly Hills Cop and essentially turned it into Cobra. So Cobra is an amalgamation of all the things that Stallone wanted to do if he was Axel Foley, like cutting a pizza up with scissors, the badass car and stuff like that. And so without Beverly Hills Cop, there would not have been a Cobra. But I agree with you. I think that it is definitely a giallo-ish action movie. George Pancosmatos, great director. It's frowned upon by some, but I think it has its defenders, and I'm one of them.
I think it's great. It had been a while before I'd rewatched it, as my current era, I guess we can say. And I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it, especially because I think in the canon of like the 80s action stars, I don't know that Stallone really stands up for me as far as like Schwarzenegger and different things go for pure action. Like, I just feel like he was doing other things that maybe, was a different target. Things like Rocky or whatever else, and writing and producing and doing all of these other roles instead of just being like the action guy. Tango and Cash, like I don't think that Tango and Cash holds a candle to Cobra.
It does not,
in my opinion. And I was really blown away just by the action, the badass car in particular, and those giallo elements of like the gloved killers, and like
the Night Stalker. He's a giallo killer, 100%. Yeah, I agree with you, and it's got a great finale too.
Yes, yeah. So I would love to see more of Cobretti, being the cure to the disease of crime. So
Right. And we don't need Brigitte Nelson in it.
No.
Just he continues on. He finds another hot model to protect.
yeah, it doesn't matter. You might as well treat it like the first one never happened, and you can just do whatever. There's criminals that need to be cleansed, and go forever.
Okay, so for me, my second one, it's my favorite Schwarzenegger action movie. Why didn't we get a sequel to True Lies? I thought True Lies is great because it's humorous, it's funny, but they set up a sequel so well. You have Boris and Doris. You have him and Jamie Lee Curtis that could have gone out and solved international crime together and fought terrorism together. They give you a little hint of it. It's like, why didn't we get more of that? And we could have had more Bill Paxton too. Bring back his character for something. Make him part of the team. I don't know. That's another movie where it's like, okay, we got a Terminator 2. We got Aliens. We got 2 Avatars. We didn't get Titanic 2. But James Cameron, come on, bro.
He loves the sequels.
I know, right? Why didn't we get True Lies 2? It was a hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and it's great. And it's almost, satire is probably a little strong, but sometimes it almost feels like a stand-up of the genre, of he's balancing that line of family life and trying to just be married and everything else, and then using all of these resources to spy on his wife and all this other stuff. And
it's
kind
also
of tongue in cheek,
Yeah, and it's the best Tom Arnold we ever got too.
Yes.
We actually like Tom Arnold in a movie. What the hell?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I always thought that we should get a sequel to that one. It's a shame, but what I hope they don't do, which they've been doing a lot lately, is we're getting these legacy reboots, right?
Yes.
I'm so tired of it. Legacy sequel is one thing if done right. I really, really wanted to hate Maverick Top Gun 2. I wanted to hate it. Damn it, I couldn't. I actually thought it was pretty good. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. And that's kind of where I'm at with these movies. It's don't make me hate this movie. And these legacy reboots, man, they kind of piss me off. And if all of a sudden we get a True Lies with Chris Hemsworth and someone no, boycott.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, very much. I'll take a sequel to the legacy reboot any day of the week. I think Bad Boys, a great example.
Right. They're
not doing anything revolutionary, but it's fine.
It's fine. We know them. We've gotten to like these characters. I would love to have a filmmaker just start making legacy sequels of old buddy cop comedies that maybe never got a sequel, and just do it for the hell of it, right? Put them on streaming, make it a limited series or something like that. If they can make, especially the Russo brothers, if they can make all those nonsense action movies on Netflix, we'll give someone who can do something with an intellectual property that we actually kind of want to see a follow up to.
Dead Heat,
I would kill for Dead Heat.
Yeah.
Great. Absolutely. All right, what's the next one on your list?
All right, so for me, I was sweating over this one for a while, but committed to it, and I think I'm going to go with The Way of the Gun.
Okay.
And I could go either for a prequel, if we're flashing back in time and it's the year after, something like that, or even a legacy sequel for that. I guess it's whatever. It's spoilers. It's been out for 30 years, whatever at this point. But I feel like the ending is ambiguous, and so I don't feel like you would be out of the realm for things to continue with Parker and Lamba. And Chris McQuarrie, writer director for that, Top Gun Maverick. Also, from what I have read, one of the reasons why it was as well received and as good as it ended up being was they brought him in to do kind of an unofficial
a punch up.
Yeah, a punch up. And I just think that the action style and The Way of the Gun even still feels very unique compared to things the closest example, is a John Woo heroic bloodshed style shootouts, but it isn't really. And I think it just feels like that because it's so loud and there's so much debris everywhere with things. But it's also very grounded and realistic. Anybody that's a shooter can watch that and recognize oh, they're actually doing these things. They're oh, that's actually how you hold the weapon, or that's actually how you reload. And it all looks very legitimate. And that the reason for that is his brother was as military. I think he was a Navy SEAL, and so he brought him in as a stunt coordinator, firearms instructor for the cast, so that they could sell that image. And I don't think there's anything really that nails it quite as well as they do,
Mhm.
while still keeping it exciting.
Yeah.
And you know, like you've got Taken or like all of these old guy badasses that come back for sequels, and I think Brian Felipe, Benicio del Toro both could even sell that today.
The chemistry between those two is so good. That's one of the things that, like, again, that was like a low budget movie. It did not get a lot of marketing. I mean, I was already a fan of McQuarrie because of Usual Suspects, right? I was already a fan of Benicio for multiple reasons, including Usual Suspects. But dude, that was filmed in our hometown. Like, my buddy was an extra in the scene at the beginning outside of Bricks, which is now another club, or even gone. It's gone, right?
Gone. Yep.
Yeah, like I grew up saying like, oh my God, that's Bricks. That's the front. I've waited in that line before.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's recognizable. The slow car chase through downtown Salt Lake City. It's like, yeah, we know all those locations. I agree. That was a fun one because you were trying to determine whether it was going to be that or what was the other one you had on your backup list.
It would be The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Yeah, Long Kiss Goodnight. Which, okay, honestly, man, Shane Black movie is a Shane Black movie, right? I love Long Kiss Goodnight, but it would be just another Shane Black vehicle.
Yes.
I was almost thinking like, I would much rather see a movie based on Samuel L. Jackson's character than another Gina Davis movie. Like, let her have her happy ending and give Mitch another adventure, you know. But who knows? They still could, you know.
Yeah, they still could. And I mean, like I go back and forth like that. I kind of erred away from that because I like, you know, she ends up with her family or whatever, everything's okay, and I feel like removing that was kind of a core part of the movie. And so, you know, how much would be lost without that sort of like, oh, who am I element, you know? But I thought Gina Davis was just a killer as like an action hero, you know, and Charlie was a great character.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like reconciling the two, like the housewife and Charlie, like it was the Charlie experience that I would want more of. And I even now I appreciate that it didn't become a romantic angle between Mitch and Charlie. You know, it was a Shane Black buddy cop.
You know what I see? I see like a prequel series of Charlie Baltimore's life before Long Kiss Goodnight. Yeah. You know, we already got our Anya Taylor-Joy as Furiosa. Why not Anya Taylor-Joy as Charlie Baltimore in the past, you know? Are you listening out there? Shane, make it happen. Okay, so my last one on the list, this isn't necessarily a sequel. I want to see just an expanded universe. So The Warriors, man.
Yes.
Everyone loves The Warriors, but to me, the best part of The Warriors isn't just the story of the Warriors, it's the world they live in. All these different gangs of all the different boroughs of New York. And if I was to pick a gang that I'd want to see a movie of, it's the Lizzies. They're kind of like the Switchblade sisters, you know, but that came out before the Warriors. I would love to see a movie based on the Lizzies and how they kind of like hold their own against all these other rival gangs. You know, I'm not saying that we have to do a gender swap of the Warriors. Keep it the Lizzies, and maybe the Warriors can make a guest appearance. But what a world Walter Hill created with that movie.
Absolutely.
Especially the opening scene where all the gangs gather together, and they took the time to create almost backstories that we never see of why these gangs the way they are. The baseball furies, all the different crazy gangs, all these different get-ups. Like, show me that movie of like how these gangs came together, but make the Lizzies the prominent topic of the movie, because I'm just obsessed with them. I've always been obsessed with them because they didn't go anywhere. They let them come to them, right? Mm-hmm. That was the best part of it. So yeah, that's the last one on my list that I'd love to see an expanded universe movie of.
I think it's great. I mean, like, how often do you see like even the Warriors costumes for Halloween? But the number of times that I've seen a Baseball Furies costume,
right?
The City of Violence 2 is like a Korean martial arts whatever film that has a very, very strong Warriors reference where they have that same sort of thing of fighting in the street.
I don't know. Maybe someone will see this, hear this, and be like, yeah, it's not a bad idea. And they might have some influence and make it happen. But if it doesn't, at least it exists in my mind. Joshua, this is a fun conversation. Thank you so much for coming to the show. Thank you for telling us about Salt Lake Action Cinema Society. And thanks for playing this little game with me of like creating these sequels that never happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me out. it's been a pleasure for sure.
Absolutely. So all the links to where you can find information on the Salt Lake Action Cinema Society, the website, the Instagram, they'll all be on the episode notes of the YouTube video and of the audio episode. So make sure you go check that out. If you're in Salt Lake City, because this is like a locals episode, sign up, go check it out. Beehive's a cool place. And yeah, like I'm just really excited that there are people out there making things happen for cinema appreciators and newcomers, right?
And always free too, just to tack on there, you know, so it's low risk to come out and check things out. We do things a little bit differently, but you know, it's not going to cost you $10, $20, whatever to check it out.
Right. And take the tracks, you know, avoid parking, use public transportation, save the planet. So yeah. All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching, listening. Please like, subscribe, rate 5 stars, tell your friends, do all that fun social media stuff. And I hope to have you on the show again very soon. We can talk about action movies. We can talk about direct-to-video stuff. I can tell a follow-up to this episode in the near future.
Okay. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. See you later, everybody.